All
So
right.
we'll call the meeting to order, 6:37. Any amendments?
Nope.
Not hearing any public comment? No, not hearing any. All right. We do have a quorum, I believe, because it's just Ernie that we're missing. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay,
I think that's
so
right. Yeah.
we can proceed. And the first thing on our list is to look at the financial and staffing analysis for adding more resources to the Barnard Pre-K. And I don't know if, Jim, this is something you had a chance to work on over the.
I shared a folder with documents. Did anybody have a chance to look at that?
Ooh.
I did not. I don't know when it was sent.
It's
Yeah, I
been
didn't
out there
see it.
for about a week,
Okay,
right next to the folder you created.
I didn't see it.
I
Sorry.
did not see that. Did you, was it, something you sent via email, or it was just something you put in the committee folder?
I put in the committee folder.
All right, you want to try sharing your screen?
So let me share my screen. So what I tried to do was take a look at what's going on in our elementary schools. And so for FY26, these are FY25 enrollments in each building. So we've got 53 in Barnard Academy, from Barnard and Prospect Valley, 10 from Barnard in Woodstock Elementary School, and 61 from Barnard in the middle high school. And you can see historically for the last 6 years, our enrollment at Barnard, which was at 80 in 2019, has dropped every year. For the town of Killington, we've got 99 students. For the town of Reading, we've got 96 students, but only 29 of them are in Reading. And so what I'm seeing is both Barnard and Reading are losing students to Woodstock Elementary School, which makes both of them kind of cost prohibitive at this point.
Well, with Reading, isn't it natural that you would have 17 kids at the elementary school because they only go to grade 3?
They go to grade 4 at Reading, and then they go to Prosper afterwards. So they go from Reading to Prosper Valley.
Oh, right. So Reading is K-4. I'm sorry.
Reading's K4. Barnard is K6.
Okay.
So Barnard would have no students typically at Prosper Valley. So here is our current enrollment at Barnard by grade. You can just see how that compares to the other schools, and our projected enrollment for FY26 in Barnard, and for all of our elementary schools. And so this is just some of the data that I put together to show kind of what we're looking at for numbers. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to go to another document.
Hey, well, Jim's pulling that up. It looks like we have someone who's joined the meeting, Amy Lennon. Amy, can you just let us know if you are in the right meeting?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. She's probably public.
All right, Amy, have already gone through public comment. We don't come back around to that again for several agenda items. So why don't we, if Amy, if you join to give public comment, we can go back and take your comment now. So you're not waiting for, an hour or so.
Sure, yeah, I actually came to listen in on I was at the last meeting, and there was a request about Barnard pre-K. So I wanted to listen to the follow-up, which I saw was on the agenda. And I'm sorry that I'm just able to get on. I don't really necessarily have any comments. I wanted to just hear what
Okay.
said about that.
Okay, then we will go back to where we were, and we're on item 4A on the agenda, which is, I think, what you wanted to listen to.
Perfect. Thank you.
So as we review the proposal for the putting the 0.5 FTE back, here are some of the things that we've discovered. The town of Barnard has had a fairly steady enrollment for the last six years, between a low of 126 and a high of 140. But the Barnard Academy enrollment has steadily declined from 80 to 57 this year. And the change is, that's a significant change. That's a, better than 20% change in enrollment. And those students are typically going to West and or Prosper Valley instead of to Barnard. And just for comparison, Killington has had a similar steady enrollment between a low of 99 and a high of 124, but unlike Barnard, Killington enrollment, has remained strong at over 100 students. Only one Killington student does not attend Killington. For FY26, we're currently anticipating a per pupil support from the state of $17,914. I think that changed since I did this a week ago, but it's pretty close to where we are. Please remember this number will change between now and when the tax rate is set. That means that each FTE of pre-K student will continue to count as 0.46 FTE. For the funding purposes, ignoring the LTW-ADM factors for poverty and population density, because those are not things that I can calculate easily. The ADM is calculated as an average of the enrollment in our buildings as of the official count windows in October of 23 and October of 24. That means that we will not receive any funding in 26 for any students that are new to our district in 26. It's a lag of 2 years, a year and 2 years.
Can I stop you there and ask a question?
Sure.
So does this mean that if we took more pre-K kids in for the fall of 2025, that we would not be getting any additional budget dollars because that's already set? So you're saying
we get no count for them until next year.
Okay, and our budget is already set.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so even if we were able to take in 10 more pre-K kids, which would be really great, we don't get any revenue from that until next year, until FY27.
Okay.
And then it stays for 2 years. We get half of it in 27, half of it in 28. To restore the certified staff levels of Barnard to the current level, cost increases about $55,000. We would also need to reduce the interventionist position back to 0.5 because that was increased from 0.5 to 1.0. One of the problems that creates is during the restructuring, we've eliminated an interventionist in one of our other schools and split a position between 2 buildings to cover the void at Prosper Valley, which means we don't have a position to put that interventionist in. So if she doesn't want to do a classroom, which I believe still may have a position, we don't have a position for her. So the two solutions that I see, and one would work this year and one would be in future years, is to move the current interventionist position to a full-time classroom teacher as budget impact of zero, but you lose your all interventionist work in Barnard. If our class sizes are as small as they appear to be, I don't know if that's important or not. If you've got a class of 8 or 10 students, can a classroom teacher do the work of the classroom teacher and the interventionist or not?
And again, can I stop you? So this would mean that we offer the interventionist an entirely different job, right? And now you're
No.
doing, you're a pre-K teacher, or the interventionist doesn't have a job and we go out and find, you know, they unfortunately lose a job and we then go find a pre-K teacher. That's what this implies.
Well, the interventionist might be the first grade teacher because it's a special certification for pre-K, and the person doing pre-K now has that certification.
Okay.
But yes. Anna, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Matt just asked the same question I had.
Okay, and then the other solution, which I see as a long-term solution if we can do it, is to partner with Stockbridge, who has 48 kids this year and has a similar issue. And Stockbridge is struggling with a building that needs work. Our Barnard building's in pretty good shape. They're struggling with some of the same class size issues we have. It would be a natural partnership, but it wouldn't help this year at all.
Do you, Jim, on that, so currently Stockbridge, Rochester are a district within whatever White River Valley SU.
Right.
So if that district to get this what we wanted, they would basically have to vote to close their school. Would they actually have the ability of allowing tuition then for those kids rather than sending those kids to the elementary in Bethel?
They might. That would be a decision they'd have to make in their district. And they may also say, that's okay through grade 6, but we want the kids back for grade 7.
Interesting.
So they
And
might not come.
they could do that.
They might not matriculate to Woodstock.
Right, right. But they could, as far as you know, like legally, they could just at this point anyway, they could say Stockbridge residents may tuition out of yeah, can tuition to any school.
If they chose to close their school, they
If they
could,
yeah.
they could then say, and you can tuition to these 2 schools. We've reached an agreement with Barnard, you can go here, or, you know, they could say pretty much whatever they want.
Interesting. Okay.
Anna?
Just for informational sake for the committee, I have not yet had any success. I have tried to reach out to Stockbridge folks. I ended up, the first reach out was actually a Rochester board member, and he responded to me. He was helpful. But when I tried to, or actually, no, not a board member, a Rochester resident that I think used to be a part of the board. And then I did reach out to a Stockbridge board member and didn't receive a response yet. But I am trying to, you know, delicately pursue this as an avenue.
And I don't know what it costs them to run their building. I don't know if just shy of $1 million to us would be cost prohibitive, would be what they're currently paying.
Yeah.
I don't know what their operating cost of that building is.
Right. And they do have the option. Well, yeah, right. I do know that they were, I looked at some recorded board meetings, And one of the last things that came up that it seems like they were considering, they're doing a lot of community outreach surveys right now.
Yep.
But they were considering what about, closing the school, but they were thinking about sending kids to Rochester or doing something where they like have some grades in Stockbridge and some grades in Rochester. They're
And
brainstorming at this point, but
they,
they're
they do,
but they're
they
obviously,
do have school choice at high school, because we have,
yeah.
I think, 4 or 5 Stockbridge students coming to Woodstock right now. Anna, you have
Okay.
your hand up?
Yeah, I have a clarifying question and then an open-ended question. Clarifying question is, so should this move forward, which absolutely breaks my heart. I know we're all kind of struggling with the state's approach to this. Would we have the ability to say you can only go to Barnard and not Killington? Because when I just pulled it up on a map, it looked like they were closer to Killington. But we have as the district, have the ability to say which school the students would go to, or would Barnard be considered like their home school, like their in-town school?
I hope that we could work with them to make Barnard their resident school, if you will.
Thank you for clarifying.
Kind of like we have with Plymouth and Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have the options to go to any one of our buildings, but their resident building is Woodstock Elementary, except for West Bridgewater, where the resident is Killington.
And that's another agenda item tonight, which is inter-district choice.
And that was going to be my second one, was how we could interplay this with, closing the gap on our smaller schools with movements on interdistrict choice, which I know is going to be further down the agenda tonight. So
One of the things that, if we partnered with Stockbridge for this, would really play in our favor is, a couple of years ago, Bryce and I worked out a bus route that started in Pittsfield, came through Stockbridge, through Barnard, and then to the high school, as a way to pick up more high school Stockbridge kids. This would open up that door so that we could actually do that bus route. And if we picked up 3 more high school kids from Stockbridge, it would pay for the bus, and then we could effectively, within our tuition costs to them, transport all their kids to the elementary school.
All right, so there's 2 good ideas here on the table. I think you can almost look at both of them initially, because one is more of a long-term solution that would probably take several more action items here. But the first one is like a real near-term solution. And I would just share my initial thoughts that, a lot of the other schools have interventionists, and they're there for a reason. They're helping the kids who are struggling the most with literacy, with math. So what is this committee's sort of reaction to the idea that you'd have a school without an interventionist? Is that a concern?
Part of what the intervention, part of what the interventionist was going to do in our current design is, because we combined 5th and 6th grade, she was going to work doing math in the 5th and 6th grade. If we go back to a standalone, I think 6th grade, which is our large class, then all of our classes would be 12 or less.
is there also an option to stick with the plan that we have currently, or are we really pushing for adjusting to open up some more pre-K space?
No, I think the status quo is just that would be just sticking with what the staffing protocol that we have now. I can speak to number one to the extent that I feel like, it's the kind of decision that is best, put to the leadership in the building. And my guess, and you know, and I get it, is that we would not want to lose having that 0.5 essentially interventionist. I think the principal would not want to do that. And the other question is the teacher, does she want to be a classroom teacher rather than interventionist? And I think both those things are important. So I feel like it's an elegant and awesome solution to the pay question, but there are those two pieces that I think are equally as important, and I feel like they're not necessarily things that I think that has more to do with the like I said, the folks in the building that know what would be the best use of.
Yeah, so Corinne, in order to keep us moving along tonight, would you be okay with having, Sherry take this proposal to the principal at Barnard and
Yeah.
kind of bouncing it off of her and, comparing the pros and
Yeah.
cons?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And for everybody on the committee, Corinne sent me a whole page of information that's also in the folder on the Google folder. So if you want to see all of the information Corinne shared, it's there also.
Thanks.
Okay. And then Corinne, if you're interested in this Stockbridge concept, I mean, I think it's good for the whole district, not just Barnard, that, we could recruit and bring some more kids in. So I would suggest that,
Yeah.
We keep this one moving. But I want to,
sure.
if it's okay, I'll move us to the next agenda item, which is 4B. It just says discussion of the, to what extent we might want additional pre-K classroom teachers as a sound investment for the district. And
Can I make a clarification on the last point? So I'm all for Corinne reaching out and seeing if there are other students that would like to join our district, but as far as like the idea of asking Stockbridge to join the district, that's not in Corinne's purview. And I just want to make sure that Corinne and all of us are on the same page, that is like a leadership thing and not a school board member thing.
Absolutely. I think, and I've talked with Sherry about this before, and it's just,
Perfect.
the idea is to kind of reach out and put feelers out and sort of start to create some relationships or get a sense of what the community is thinking. Trying
Okay, yeah,
to do that.
I just want to clarify between option 2 and what Corinne's being asked to do is different. Awesome, thank you.
And I don't know how it has to happen, but I know like Windsor Southeast School Board just reached out directly to us and asked how we would feel about being part of their board. So I do think there is some board to board, conversations that are certainly allowed to happen.
Okay.
There's some work going on HB 484, whatever the current bill is, that would allow some of these conversations. As we bring forward a proposal that is greater than 5 districts. And one of the things that we're looking at is how can we be strategic and make one of our buildings like Barnard a viable building as we merge and go forward. Same thing with Reading. Can we bring in Cavendish? Can we bring in Albert Bridge into Reading, maybe add 4 rooms to Reading, and then make it a 150 student school and really be a viable school in a merged district. That's our shining star as far as energy efficiency and everything. We put a lot of money in that building. It's a great building. Why wouldn't we do that when the other 2 are both suffering with buildings that need work? And so we're having these conversations unofficially because we can't officially talk about it yet. But these are the conversations that are going on as we try to come up with a way to meet the expectations of the governor and the legislature in finding more efficient ways to educate kids.
Can I ask you, Jim, do you, given that, and what Matt said, is it appropriate for me to reach out sort of as a representative of the board to the board directly, kind of, and again, just kind of with an inquiry, and if so, would you think that looping the superintendent in is also appropriate or not necessarily?
I would
About that.
certainly keep Sherry in the loop, but maybe
Well,
reach out to
I
their
guess I
board,
mean the White River Valley superintendent.
but reach out to their board first and see if this
Yeah.
is something that unofficially, because you have no legal authority to represent the board in this decision. But if
Right.
this is something they'd be interested in pursuing, then we can come back and have Sherry and their superintendent and our board start conversations.
Okay, thanks.
Think of it as the beginning of like Coke trying to acquire Pepsi. Like, can we just go out for coffee? All right.
Yeah.
So
Coke, right?
next,
For Coke.
next agenda item was yours, Corinne, and it seems like the concept is, if we invest more in pre-K, does it help grow our district? Is there more to it that you wanted to introduce?
Yeah, no, I wanted to bring it to the committee just because so it was brought up, just kind of briefly. I think, Anna, you brought up the idea, though it was, an idea that I'm also thinking about and has been, I think, brought forward in the past about to what extent is pre-K, to what extent does it financially help the district? And, I wondered if, I think, Jim, you have shared some things like this with us in the past, but I wanted to have a chance to get my head around, or our heads around, again, the sort of financials of pre-K, because I feel like sometimes I know, I understand them, and sometimes it seems like I'm hearing different things, or I don't understand. So in terms of, so there's two things. There's one is, does it cost us, how much does it cost us to have a pre-K classroom? And then there's like the immediate investment, then there's is it giving us savings down the line? So those are kind of two different pieces. But then the second thing is a more broad question that I think we probably can't answer, but I'm just raising it, is pre-K as having strong pre-Ks in our district schools just as a an attractive element of our district, potentially bringing folks into the district. So I not looking for anything necessarily super specific, and we don't have to go into this too deeply, but I wanted to just bring it to the committee because it did come up briefly in the board meeting.
So let me share with you some thoughts. And Shayna is here, and she can certainly correct me when I misspeak. Pre-K, if you look at it as a standalone, is a money loser. It costs us more to operate it than we bring in revenue. That said, when we capture the students when they're 3 and 4 years old and 4 years old, and start working with them towards kindergarten, first grade, and the other grades, the long-term investment in those students pays off in reduced special ed costs for the rest of their lives. And so the standalone loss saves us money every single year afterwards. So it's kind of like when the grocery store does a loss leader to get you in to buy everything. It's kind of a loss leader for us because over the next 12 or 13 years, it will save us more than we lose in operating the pre-K.
That's under the assumption that they stay in our district too, because when we talk about the Weathersfield kids, yeah.
Yeah, and the Weathersfield kids, what they're good for, honestly, in Reading, is keeping the class size viable. What is the long term though, and you're seeing this in Reading, we're seeing it in Barnard, we're seeing it everywhere, is having a full day pre-K program, and many parents participate in it, not all, but many, is an attraction. It brings people to our communities. And we're seeing organic growth in our young parent population here in Woodstock. And we're seeing it in some other communities where, you know, some of the older adults are leaving the communities and younger families are coming in with young children. And they're coming not just for the real estate, but for the education and everything else that we have to offer on our side of the coin. And so I believe it's an attraction to the community.
So I'm also drinking the Kool-Aid. I like that we offer pre-K, and I know it's tough from a financial perspective, but I would support, you know, additional investment in it. And I know last year through the whole budgeting cycle, we were looking at what it would imply to not offer pre-K to 3-year-olds, but ultimately we kept, you know, 3-year-olds in the system. But as far as like how we as the committee proceed with this one, I mean, doesn't this really come down to developing our fiscal year 27 budget and understanding like what constraints will be again? You know, will we be 3 million in the hole again and have to find 3 million in cuts, or will we be, you know, to avoid penalty? So I think, you know, I think for me, I look at this and say, it is a good idea to invest in pre-K, but what are my trade-offs? Like, what am I gonna have to, if I have to like cut something else out, I don't know what that is yet, because we're not in the budgeting cycle quite yet.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of movement to it. It doesn't sound like we're really making any decisions right here, just sort of having an open discussion. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to land over the next year on interdistrict choice and pre-K for 3-year-olds, and how do we prioritize pre-K enrollment. So I think that given that it's all on our radar, it's definitely going to come up again in the future, and will obviously come up at the full board as well. So yeah, I don't know that we're gonna, I think that gathering this information is really awesome, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation as the dust starts to settle around other things that we're discussing more tonight and at the board.
Absolutely. Since Shayna's here, I don't know if she's, well, yeah, she maybe, or Jim. This just occurred to me, and it's related but not on topic, which is after school programming. Just, do we still offer that at at West or at any of the schools?
We only have it right now in Killington, and it's run by the town.
Okay. So that did go by the wayside almost across the board, or across the board from a district standpoint. When did that happen? Because I know Barnard lost it, you know, I think maybe during COVID or pre-COVID.
I think we lost it shortly after COVID,
Yeah.
pretty much at West, which was where we had it.
And what was the reason for dropping it?
Staffing. Couldn't staff it was the biggest part, and couldn't make it sustainable. And
losing money.
It was losing money across the board. Every building was losing money. Killington is at a break even just about right now. But they're the only one that still operates it. The Barnard kids, I believe, are going into on Route 12.
To artistry?
Not artistry.
Rainbow.
Rainbow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Rainbow's also operating one that a lot of the Woodstock kids go to. Some of the Reading kids are going down to Albert Bridge School in West Windsor. And then there's another one for the younger kids at the church in town that the kids walk down to.
And then the community classroom in Bridgewater gets some of our kiddos.
Okay, and we do stop at the Bridgewater Town Hall in the community, and their community program there gets some of the kids from that area.
Right.
So
Are
it's
there
being,
like state, is there any state support or grants or programming related to after school care?
We don't qualify for the Century 21st grants because our poverty rate is not high enough.
Oh, okay. All right. That put some puzzle pieces together for me. All right.
So, as far as investing in more pre-K classrooms and teachers, I would say that, again, I would support it, but I kind of got to see where we are with the enrollment, like kids coming in for those programs and classroom space, and then just, budget trade-offs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something to weigh in the budget process. One thing that could help with that, and I don't know if there's something we can do sort of administratively to help with this, but sometimes families move in, mid-year, so you don't know what kids are around. But if there's a way that we can get more of a sense of interest in pre-K from the families that currently live in our towns earlier on, then we can have a better sense of numbers. And so some of that is a communication strategy, problem. But almost like even over the summer or something, like some sort of reach outs to say, not a commitment, obviously, but do you have 3-year-olds that might be coming up, and do you think they might be, wanting to enroll the following year? Because it seems like there's such a difference between, what enrollment actually is in the fall and then what it is, or at least this year it was at several places. There was a big jump in those sort of late fall months. So if somehow we could get info earlier, it could help our process.
and we do the open enrollment. I think it's early December, but by then we're most of the way through the budget process, so it's kind of
Yeah.
late to add staffing.
Right. I mean, it's almost something that like board members, I mean, I don't know. My tool is the listserv, but there's potentially other tools, but I don't know if board members would take on, but somebody sort of reaching out community by community again, earlier, not for enrollment, but just for, how many 3-year-olds are there actually in our town? Which I did a little bit of that this spring when I was just looking at the Barnard pre-K, and there are a good handful of families that were like, oh yeah, I got a 3-year-old coming up, or they basically told me the ages of their kids, from 0 to 3 now, so I could start getting a sense of like, oh, these are the kids in our community who will be coming up next year or in 2 years. It was pretty helpful.
It'd be nice if we could get that conversation going between the community and the principal.
Yeah.
In each community. And
Yep.
I don't know, if there's siblings of students that are already in the school, we have a communication device that already works. But if they don't have siblings in the school, I'm not quite sure how to make it happen.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think it used to be where I remember when my kids were 1 and 2, and it was, just the Barnard School District, and you had the school a town meeting, and you had the school meeting and everybody gathered in March, and the principal was there saying, oh, who's, they could see you, and they were like, oh, your kid's going to be enrolling. But yeah, the principal, if they could make some sort of reach out in some way, but right.
I mean,
Anyway,
you could
things
have,
to think about.
you could have some simple Google sheet with like a notice of intent to apply. So it's not your actual application. It doesn't get you on a wait list. It doesn't put you in a queue. It gives you no priority. But you could just say, I've got a child or 2 that I'm anticipating to apply for a spot. And I mean, you could be doing that. You could be doing that now for the fall of 2026.
Yep.
I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
simple
I
Google
have a
spreadsheet.
spreadsheet like that for Barnard
Yeah.
going. So.
But that would be something that the principals would have to.
I think for me, they're the natural conduit.
Yeah.
And I know in New Hampshire, we had something called Child Find that we had to do. And we had to have all the children before they were 3, needed to know who they were.
We do that for identification of suspected disabilities. If a parent feels that their child might have a delay or disability.
So we do that for children who parents think might be disabled, but not for just general 2-year-old kids.
So, and how do you do that, Shayna? How do you send that reach out to the community?
Shelley Parker, who works in this office, reaches out to local nurseries and daycare programs. And we also put advertisements in various places.
Okay.
And it happens at a certain time of year, and it's linked to some AOE reporting that we're required to do.
Okay.
All right, so should we ask Sherry whether she would take this concept to the principals? Like, could we just get a, an open survey that, someone could just start telling us now whether they're planning to enroll someone in pre-K in the fall of 2026?
And maybe she could, maybe it's something, an item at the next leadership meeting. I don't know. We can't make the agenda for that, but it would be an appropriate place with all the principals together.
So I know Raina in the past has come to our full board meetings and talked a lot about the whole process for getting into pre-K. Is that still her job, or did that go to somebody else?
It's transitioning to Jan.
Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is get an action item or just let it go. So do we want this to be an action item of some kind that we put in place to get a better sense of incoming enrollment?
I think at least
I
digging
think
into
that
the
would be
feasibility of
really
it.
helpful for the budget process.
Yeah, maybe we give it a test drive for the first year, for this upcoming year, and see what comes of it, and or ask Sherry what the feasibility of doing it is.
Okay, I will make a note of that. We can, what I suggest is that we'll put the meeting minutes together tonight, and then as we write them up, I'll probably forward the minutes to Sherry directly as the chair and just say, hey, this concept was proposed. Is it feasible? Could someone implement it? And we'll see what she says.
Sounds great.
All right. I think we can go on to intra-district choice. I think we all know what this is, and I think it's been teed up by the administration as possibly a solution if we didn't have it to get the enrollment up into some of our smaller schools. And with the state mandates coming or the state legislation coming, this might be a way to meet minimum class sizes. So I think that's why this is on the agenda. And as I've thought about it, my major concern would be when we closed certain schools, we told residents of those towns that there would be some choice. And we've also got people who maybe moved into our district knowing that there was choice. But I'm certainly open to discussing the topic. I just would highly recommend that it be that, certain families be grandfathered. Like if someone bought a house in a certain town, but had planned to send their kid to a different school, and then we tell them you can no longer do that. I wouldn't like that. But
Yeah, I think that the way I was thinking about it was that there would be some sort of process whereby you could, I don't know what the word is, but basically apply for or sort of advocate for choice. I mean, the cases that I was thinking of were in particular if there's a student who is struggling for some reason in their home school and the, partnership of the families and the administration or the staff feel that they could be served better at a different school, then that is a strong case for choice. And I think that sort of, educational opportunity sort of exception, at the very least would be important to maintain. But maybe there would be these other, and then obviously also if like there's there would be some grandfathering because there's some kids who are already enrolled at other schools, and so you would let them obviously finish out their tenure at the other school. Yeah, and I don't know individual cases in terms of you moved to one town, but you wanted to send your now 1-year-old to a different school. I mean, they could make a case for that. I wonder how many of those there are. But I think that there are, some benefits of having choice. There's some attractiveness of there being intra-district choice just as a general option. But I do see some real benefits, not just to the smaller schools, but also alleviating, some of the pressure on Wes, for example, where there's, maybe, well, I don't know exactly. I hear about how the classes are. I mean, I guess they have to be big now, but evening out the population can be better for all of the schools. So I think in that, but obviously in particular, trying to maintain our smaller schools in this situation where we can't send them all to West anyway. Right now, so we need to, it would be good if there were some strategies to help with the enrollment. So I would support bringing the idea. I don't know what sort of preparation, if this is even a finance committee piece, thing to bring to the board. But I would support it being discussed at the full board level anyway.
okay, Anna, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I see this as a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's for the long term is going to be necessary to protect our smaller schools. Along the lines of what Corinne said, there's obviously going to have to be some maturation for students that are already in, another school that's not their resident school. I don't think it'd be a good idea to move those kids back to their home school. I think keeping them there is the way to go. And while I see it as an attractor for, moving to one town and being able to put your child in another town, I think for the district at large and for our smaller schools, allowing interdistrict choice is going to have to be on maybe like a case by case basis that has to, each child that applies for another school, there has to be like a good solid reason for it. But other than that, I hate to take it away, and also for the long term, for the health of our district and our small schools, I think it's going to be necessary.
And I was, my wife was on the board when it went through, but I'm trying to remember, what were some of the original reasons that we introduced it? Does anyone recall?
The only
I
thing
think
I can recall, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I think it was the flexibility for parents that, travel by another school to get to work. Or if they had one student in a different school and then they had another student coming up in order to make the flexibility to drop both students off at one campus. That was that was what I remembered from the Reading side of things.
The I think it was broadly something that was promoted as part of consolidation in
Mhm.
general, as a tool for potential further consolidation.
And I know, I mean, as I've described it to people who thought about moving to our district, I've always like touted it as a really cool option. Like you could maybe find, you know, a more affordable home because there sure aren't any in Woodstock right now. But still go to Woodstock if that's what you desire. Or you know, live in Plymouth or you know, because there was a lot of worry, I think, about if you close a school in a community, then you know, the community's not gonna have anything left. But really, there's an option for people to move into Bridgewater, Plymouth, where we don't have schools, but they get school choice. So I always thought it was something we kind of use in the marketing of our district, but
Mhm.
if it's something that we need to reconsider, I think you're right. It needs to be a full board discussion.
Jim, do you have a sense of whether, I mean, I know Sherry brought it up as something for the board to start thinking about, just a brief mention at our last meeting.
I
Yeah, I
think
was
if
gonna
you
say,
go,
is there anything that the administration would want to present in this regard?
I think that your policy on interdistrict choice requires us to bring it up when you have a school or schools that over a 3-year period are more than X above the rest of the schools. And we now have that situation. So that's why it's being brought up, more so that as part of the merger, this was a policy or part of your articles agreement that you agreed to. And
Mhm.
now we must follow them and bring it to the board.
Right.
Anna?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that sustainability policy was, you know, if we were finding some of the campuses to edge towards unsustainability, starting to look at those different strategies for strengthening those schools.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, as Jim was referring to Reading having hit that 3-year marker to rediscuss the sustainability of the campus, and the chart that was put up already, which said, I think 17 students were going from Reading up to Wes, and that's, I mean, 17 on top of the 37 we have enrolled is, you know, nearly what, 50s, almost 60s, which at that point we're burgeoning on, you know, closing in with the numbers that we have at Barnard. So I think that really Reading is the one that's at this point at most risk for questioning the sustainability and would benefit most from not having interdistrict charge as it stands right now, right? Those 17 students would matriculate through Woodstock Elementary. They wouldn't come back to Reading.
Right.
But it would set us up for better success in the future. And I think if we had two schools, assumingly Reading and Barnard at similar levels, then it would be stronger argument for both of them to continue being supported.
Yeah. I'll say too, I brought up I just briefly attended the Barnard PTO meeting this afternoon, and just brought up this idea that was on the agenda, to kind of get a sense of what people thought, and you know, they were supportive of the idea of looking into this. And it is something probably that I would think the board might want to, you know, we might want to do some kind of like community survey type of thing as one of the initial steps in exploring this.
And in order to actually restrict the inter-district choice, you'd have to put on the warrant and vote on it next March.
Yep. So we wouldn't want to go through all the rigmarole if it didn't seem like it was something that was gonna.
And that's because it's not, because if it was just a policy, you know, our board can change policy without putting it on the ballot. Why does this have to be on the ballot?
It's an
I bel-
article of agreement.
I believe it's part of the article of agreement.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we report out at the next full board meeting that we discussed it? I think we could ask Sherry at that time whether administration wants to, you know, present anything on it. Whether it should stay in our committee. You know, just kind of who's in charge of this issue, especially if it needs to be advanced all the way to, you know, a ballot measure.
Right. Yeah. Yep, that sounds good. Yeah, general discussion and, you know, and kind of what would be next steps.
All right, moving us along, I had on here the yield bill, and this is something Jim had brought to my attention, and I saw it when it came out. I don't know if it's passed into law yet. Last time I checked, it had not.
It has not.
Okay, but it has a yield that would.
Do you need a plug-in?
This is only for Apple. I don't think it'll work.
This one?
Yeah. My machine is losing power.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Thank you. So it had, I think, a yield that benefited us if it were to pass, but it had some other aspects to the. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Can you still hear us?
I can. Anna or Anna?
I can hear y'all.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I often do a thumb up just so I don't have to unmute and interject.
No, it's good. All right. So it I think reduced what was being taken from second homeowners. So I don't know, Jim, if you can remember the summary you gave me. But I just wanted to make this committee aware that if it passes into law, I believe it impacts what we collect from taxpayers for fiscal 26.
So the yield bill does several things. It reduces the non-homestead tax rate by a couple cents. It reduces the homestead tax rate by a fraction of a cent. It takes $70 million from the state general fund, which creates a $70 million cliff at the end of next year. That they need to find $70 million before they start funding any new programs a year from now, because they are tapping an unsustainable revenue source. So for you as residents, the impact to your tax rate will be pennies, maybe a couple bucks. It will not be significant. For a non-homestead, it'll be a little more, but it'll be dollars, not hundreds of dollars. The bigger concern to me is that the governor and the legislature have kicked the can down the road a year, and we'll be looking at a double-digit tax rate increase in the fall of 26, because they've drained the bank again and now need to start, need to make up $70 million before they can even get to ground zero to start moving forward.
So
Do you
is
think
it? Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Do you think that part of that was to just put pressure on the legislation, whatever legislation is being moved forward in terms of consolidation, et cetera?
I don't know. I've got mixed emotions about it. The governor was pushing the 70 million hard,
Yeah.
But it's almost as if he's setting them up to fail, because a year from now, we can then say, look, you didn't do what I wanted, and now you've got a 15% tax rate increase.
That's kind of my feeling. That's kind of my
And
feeling.
so
He usually doesn't like to do
that's
that
my
one-time
read
money
on it.
stuff.
And to me, that's really frustrating.
Right.
We'd be better off getting the 5% increase or 6% or whatever it is this year, and then have another smaller single-digit increase next year. And instead of playing games with an artificial tax rate.
Yeah.
I spoke to all of our reps about that and kind of got blown off. It's too late. We're not doing anything about that. We need this 70 million.
Huh.
So
it's likely to pass, was my question. In the law?
it passed out of the House. I don't know what it's going to do into law. It's probably going to pass into law too.
Does it go to so as to get passed by the House, and then does it go to a Senate committee or just the Senate at large?
I believe a Senate committee, but I think the Senate committees have been studying it so that they'll move it quickly to the Senate at large.
Right. Okay.
And the yield bill in and of itself is a relatively small bill. The bigger education bill is stumbling in the Senate right now.
Yeah.
All right, so just so I understand the mechanics of it, if it passes into law, it will not change the amount of money our district receives to fund our operations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we get the same amount of money as a budget item, but it would impact our taxpayers' tax rates, what they pay. So when we published all the information about this upcoming budget and said your tax rate's going to go up by this %, we could almost republish that table and say yield bill passed, your actual tax rate is going up by this instead of that. So we could tell taxpayers the results of it.
We could.
Okay, but our district doesn't get any more or less money.
What it really changes is the amount of money that we forward to Montpelier. Because keep in mind, we forward more money to Montpelier than we keep.
Right.
Okay. And then the 70 million that the state's putting in to allow less to be collected from taxpayers, then in the following budgeting season, the state will have less to give.
Well, just to break even, the state will have to give 70 million again next year just to get us to where we are right now.
Okay.
And that's the concern. We know health insurance isn't going down. We know union collective bargaining agreement increases aren't going down. So our costs aren't going down, and yet they're starting with less money to fund education by $70 million when they start the budget process at the legislature a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions on this one before we move on?
Nope.
Do we have an idea on when we will get a final answer on whether it passed or not?
No, I'm hoping that we have something in June.
Okay. So months received, thanks.
All right, the next item, this was on the agenda last time, but it was the first time that we all saw it, and that was the budget calendar. And if anyone wanted to give feedback to Jim, I put this back on the agenda. My feedback is, I just think that the sooner, if in fact we end up in a position where we have to make budget cuts again, the sooner we can get sort of proposals up to the full board, so it doesn't just stay in committee, I think the better. And the sooner we can get community feedback, I think the better. So that is sort of my general feedback. And I know that the calendar didn't show us getting it to the full board until December 6th, I believe.
Yeah.
I think we just need to have drafts to the full board in November, if not in October. And, you know, if there's a way to take in some community input, maybe through surveys, you know, as early as like September, I think we should do that. Anyone else have specific feedback on the calendar?
I don't. It's a balancing act each year to kind of settle on a budget and then have the state change numbers. So I'm all for collecting more information, and want us to just be aware that, you know, if we put a lot of effort in the front end, it may completely be waylaid by the state adjusting numbers from their end of things.
And the first true indication that we get from the state where things are is typically the December 1st yield letter. And that's kind of what makes some of this hard.
But won't we know well before that whether penalty phase is coming back, and won't we, which it probably is, right?
Penalty phase, I think we will have next year.
All right, so and if it's like this year, it's you can't be more than what 1.18 over the average of all other per pupil spending in the state. Is it 1.18? That's the number I'm remembering it.
Interesting. That's not very much.
Well, it just means your district can't be 18% higher than the average of all districts.
Oh, 18%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I was thinking 1%.
And then we have to make assumptions around inflation, and we have to just like forecast what we think our budget is going to be. But at what point do you think you would maybe be able to tell us, I think we're going to have a hole of X to fill?
Well, and that's the problem. In September, I thought we were at the cap because the state had given us a projection of what the inflation index would be. They'd given us a projection of several things, and then they changed all that right around Thanksgiving and then the first week in December. And so we went from breaking even and right at the cap to a $450,000 hole.
But we knew pretty early on that we had almost 3 million
We did.
to cut. And
Yeah.
and I guess I'm starting to wonder, as a new member of this committee, like, will we have a sense of that come June, July? Like how soon will we know if it's going to be, deja vu and we're right where we were last year, having to find another 3 million out of our budget?
When the yield bill and the education bill both get passed, or if the education bill fails, we'll have a good idea. If they pass, we'll know where we're going. If it fails, if the education bill fails, I have absolutely no idea what that means to us.
It just means status quo, right? It means that there'll be a penalty phase, and
Yeah, it means that we're not going to do any planning for anything, but yes. So I should know, again, typically by June 30th. It wasn't until the second week of July last year before we finally got something signed by the governor.
what does he sign second week of July?
He signs the education bill and the yield bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just like the end of the session.
Yeah.
And what he vetoes or what he doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's when laws become law. Okay.
And they actually had to come back. The legislature had to come back and do an override in July last year. I don't know that they will be able to do an override this year.
Right.
All right. Well, my request, Jim, is when you have a sense of what our budget looks like next year, because you just kind of roll the numbers forward with any expected increases. and can start comparing that to what we think the penalty phase will be. I just want to start to get a sense of rough numbers. Are we going to be looking for budget cuts?
I will know roughly what our budget will be early September. I won't have any of the principal input yet, but I'll roughly know by then. I will know what the law is, so I'll know what the math for the penalty phase. I won't know all the components of the penalty, the final numbers of the components of the penalty phase, but I'll know the math of the penalty phase. So I'll know all that by end of the summer, early fall.
Okay. So when we come back as a committee after the July break, we meet in August, right?
I think so, yeah.
We may not know then, but then by the September meeting, we'll have a better sense of what work is cut out for us.
By the September meeting, I ought to have some rough numbers.
Okay.
Jim, when didn't you last year, leadership had some retreat in the summertime, and it's where it talked about a lot of budget.
In third week in July, we spent a whole day on budget cuts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
So would you anticipate that you would, I mean, is that gonna be not gonna be something that happens every time you guys retreat, that you're gonna have to think about how can we cut more money? I mean, I guess, do you anticipate having that conversation again this year in July?
I
Even not
anticipate
knowing all the details, or?
I anticipate not spending a whole day or a day and a half on it in July like we did last year, but being aware of what we're up against by then.
Okay, yeah.
Anna has her hand up.
Anna, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to put it on everybody's radar that we have July and August off from our board meetings and committee meetings, so we would be coming back together in September.
I knew we had July off. Are you sure we have August off?
Yeah, I just pulled up the calendar. So we meet in June is our last meeting, and then July and August are our 2 months off. So that doesn't mean we can't meet in September. It's just going to be like we need to be ready to hit the ground rolling in September.
Okay. Duly noted.
Doesn't mean I won't communicate with you.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to number 8 here, which is just if you have any update on the strategic planning work that we're going to start with the grad students, maybe.
The grad students are actually here today. They spent an hour touring the high school, and I've spent 3 or 4 hours working with them, and anticipate the guy leading it was in the play at Harvard this week, and so, or last week, so he was busy with his acting versus his work on our project, and so he's getting back to it this week, and I expect to get something from them by early next week. And then we will start trying to convert it into a document that we can use.
All right.
Great.
Harvard's pretty busy these days.
Yeah.
Whoops, we didn't mean to send you that letter. Okay, number 9, and this is our last item before we go back to public comment, is just where things are with the state legislation. And I know we had our local representatives come to the last board meeting, and they presented what is the House version of legislation that was based off the Superintendent's Association. And we got that nice side-by-side comparison. And I haven't really followed it since then. So I'm just opening up the floor to folks in terms of where we think things are headed. Is this something that we think will pass in the law this year? Do we think it's going to be more like the House version or the Governor Scott version? This is the comparison we all got.
I can speak I can just say a few things, which is that as the representative of the Rural Community School Alliance, so you know that passed, I think it was since our representatives came to our board meeting, it did pass the House. So now it goes over to Senate committee, and then Senate at large. When some representatives from the Alliance testified to the Senate committee a couple weeks ago now, they invited the RSCA to bring forward sort of a more concrete sort of alternative proposal. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's something that's going to be brought forward pretty soon. I think it'll be released at a press release and brought to the committee. So the Senate committee was, open to hearing the concerns that the Alliance brought forward, which had to do with the numbers, the numbers, class sizes, school sizes, and the concern about the legislation moving towards closing a lot of schools, a lot of rural schools, and the data brought forward around sort of wanting to see more data that actually supports the notion that consolidation is actually going to save money and improve outcomes. So those are sort of the concerns. So there will be something coming out, by this, grassroots group in opposition to H454 soon. What traction that will have, I don't know. But I can say the Senate seemed open to hearing something different. So there may be some modifications.
And they're opposing the Governor Scott version or the House version?
The House version, the H454. This, yeah. I think the Scott version's pretty much like it's not really being considered as a thing anymore. The H454 is sort of what's on the table.
Yeah. All right, Jim, any other insights you have for where it's headed?
Just that it's not going anywhere fast right now. Doesn't mean that won't change, especially after they hear more testimony, but right now it's kind of stalled in the Senate committee.
Okay, that brings us back to public comment. And I think Amy has dropped off. And with that, we can adjourn. But I do want to go back through and just make sure everyone's action items were clear. So in terms of having Sherry talk to the principal at Barnard about the possibility of the interventionist position becoming a pre-K position, was that you, Jim? Yep. Okay, and then I will ask Sherry after we finish the meeting minutes to see whether it would be feasible to implement some kind of like notice of intent to enroll your child in pre-K, just so we get a sense of who's out there. And then I think the other main takeaway was that we need to tee up for the full board the interdistrict choice discussion, so we can, I guess the question is, do we want that to be on the board agenda in 2 weeks? Because I can always report out during the agenda when they ask, what the finance committee talked about last week. But do we want to preemptively get it onto the board agenda?
I think if it's not, I think it's worth asking Carrie if it could be, if it's not too chock full. I sort of feel like the sooner the better as far as having a board discussion. So,
okay, well, I'll ask when we finish the notes on here, I'll add that to my list and just ask Carrie whether it could be a board agenda item for 2 weeks from today.
I have added action items to my minutes document. I don't normally do that, but I'll try to do that since we're talking specifically about action items. So just clarify for me, we're adding an agenda, or we're going to request adding an agenda item, which I think is a better idea, just to put it on folks' radar to think about before we arrive. And the full board discussion would be on the intra-district choice. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm I had
And
the
then
topic right.
I will try again to reach out to Stockbridge.
Okay. I like the idea of putting action items on our meeting minutes. Otherwise, it's just a lot of talk.
I
So,
like it.
I concur.
I think that way, if we do want to get things done before the next meeting, we'll know who's accountable.
Yeah.
So I think we can adjourn, and it's not even 8 o'clock yet.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:58.
All right.
If
I second
everyone
that.
could take a look at the minutes, make any edits by tomorrow. I'll try to keep an eye on my inbox this time. Corinne, I apologize. Last time you had sent edits, and it's been so long that somebody had edits,
Oh.
and there was nothing tangible. It was more grammatical stuff, but I will keep a better idea on it in the next 24 hours.
That's good.
And it's
All right.
already in the finance folder. I'm just wrapping it up now.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
You're welcome. Good night, all.
All right. Good night. All right. Bye.